Now, anyone should be able to request an instant review from the sheriff's office, which I did and subsequently received. There are multiple redactions for obvious reasons, and these can sometimes affect the sentence flow, but I'll do my best to relay the information back regardless. Before we go into the more contentious details, I think it's worth noting that the report found that the son had assimilated well into his new family, and when monitoring his current health, appeared to be in a happy and supportive environment, which I hope we can all rejoice over, regardless of your opinion on the former parents. Speaking of whom, we're at the center of this very curious case.
It's crazy how you can grow so much in such a little amount of time. I'm definitely not who I was when we first started YouTube.
As expected, the report was
Definitely not who it was when we first started YouTube. I hate that they point out, like, shit that's obvious all the time. If you just started YouTube and then, like, a year passed, you're not the same person you were a year ago. If you're still the same person you were a year ago, you suck. What the fuck? It's stupid. Did I save any more bees? No, there actually haven't been any more bees in my pool, but I also put, like, a cover over it the last few days because it got, like, cloudy and rainy. And the rain just drops the temperature of the pool, and my cover heats it up a little bit just from the sun. So it's been covered more lately. But, yeah, no bees. There's been a lot of spiders and crickets, actually. A whole bunch of crickets. And the spiders that go in there are, like, they're able to, like, splay themselves out pretty well and just, like, stick around on the top of it. And they only seem to die when they get stuck in my filter, and they just get circled around and pulled into the filter. And they can't live. But I don't mind them being there. They literally just run around on my pool, and they kill all these little ass bugs all the time, and I'm okay with it. You've been the same person your whole life. The thing is, you've also spent, to this point, your whole life around the same people doing the same things. And at least that's how it works here. So it's like once you become an adult and you have to get a job and you start interacting with people in a different way than you do with school and going to, like, extracurricular activities, clubs, and sports and stuff, and you're actually in the real world doing things with your life, you develop more of a personality of yourself and your own personality, and you start to really find that as you progress out of that situation. At least that's how it works here. I assume it would be similar everywhere, though. If you want Doritos, then get some Doritos. And what are you doing?
Unable to tell anyone too much about the adoption process other than it was legal and that the new family had received sufficient background checks, which was fine. I don't think there's too much that people need to know
there. You go.
There were minor disputes such as Myka's reference to fundraising, where she discusses the GoFundMe, but not other methods such as the 1,000-piece puzzle of their son, though I'm sure if that was brought up she would have an explanation at hand.
The fuck?
No. What was more interesting were the explanations pertaining to their decision in dissolving this adoption. Myka and perhaps James, I don't know, specific names have been redacted in this instance, frame their now departed son as being physically aggressive towards his other siblings in the household. They state that they had multiple carers quit on them due to his behavior and eventually had to hire a full-time employee just to keep their children safe, which was very costly. They said multiple family members couldn't handle him, and there have been numerous evaluations supporting the position that the son's place in the household was no longer tenable.
Remember, this is also the kid that they knew had some health concerns, some mental health concerns as well, and that they had stated numerous times that didn't matter because they knew that this was their son and that they just wanted to love him and raise him and take care of him because he's their son, and that nobody was going to be taking them and that he wasn't returnable. He is their son. This is what they said. Their own words, right? The hypocrisy is astounding.
They also state they have video footage to support their comments with regards to his behavior. They state that although their biological offspring are now safe, one son will be needing therapy for what he endured, and another daughter commented about how she now feels safer without their adopted son under their roof. It appears that safety and cost were the two issues at the heart of this matter, and you can't often have one without the other.
No, you can't. And, like, this is a legitimate issue to have. If the child you're adopting is, like, if he or she is attacking or assaulting other people in your house, consistently or constantly, basically, right? That's a legitimate reason to be like, look, we can't take care of this kid. Like this kid needs a family that doesn't have other kids. He doesn't get along with other children. That's a legitimate issue to have, right? So, and the fact is, like, being so abusive that he creates trauma that one kid needs therapy for a long time. Like, you can't say that he's going to need therapy for a long time because you don't know that. Like, therapy for 6 months might be sufficient. Like, that might be all that kid needs, is to realize, oh, well, that's done now, and we move forward. And come to that conclusion in 3 months, come to that conclusion in 6 months. It's all dependent on the child and the person going through the therapy and how receptive they are to it. It's not something you can really put a timeline on. It has potential of being a very long time. That doesn't mean that it will be for sure. It also has the ability to be an incredibly short time relatively. So there's that. But this is a legitimate issue to have with adopting a kid, or even like when you adopt an animal, you adopt a dog, right? If you get a dog or a cat or a bird, whatever it is that you've adopted, and it's aggressive, you have the same problem. So, like, this is a legitimate reason to be like, yeah, we're not going to adopt this child. Your brother ate your Doritos? The audacity. What kind of Doritos were they, though? Were they the best kind of Doritos? I doubt you guys have my favorite Doritos there, to be honest. They're not even everywhere here. I haven't seen them since I moved, actually.
Another specific instance of these two themes surfacing was the thumb incident. You know, the clip where he had duct tape around his hand. Well, Myka had an explanation for that as well. It appears the child was compulsively sucking his thumb to the point where he would start to develop blisters. His therapist had recommended a thumb guard. However, he ripped off the one he had initially been provided with. So Myka, in what she admits was a bad judgment call, instead of replacing it, decides to go full DIY and use duct tape to keep it on.
Like I said before, that was a stupid thing to do. The duct tape doesn't make any sense. Like, there's actually like a liquid. It looks like nail polish. Like, the bottle looks like a nail polish bottle that you can put on your kids' fingernails. That way, if they suck their thumb, it's like a I don't know how to describe it. So it gives your tongue a sensation that the human body naturally wants to avoid. So it's a deterrent to condition you to, like, that's not something you do, is suck on my thumb, right? And there's that. Some people use, like, instead of that, they'll use, like, hot sauce or jalapeno juice or some sort of chili juice or whatever, just because, like, then it's hot and it's spicy, and that makes people not want to suck their thumb either. It's like, come on now. Oh, what? That's a new one. Look at that. You got a new prompt. See, my mom used to do the one that has, like, the repelling thing for, like, the way it interacts with your tongue. She did that with me when I was a child because they couldn't get me to stop sucking on my thumb either. So, and now it's like I chew my fingernails is like it's something I do when I'm nervous or when I've got anxiety or something. Like, I chew my fingernails. So I just cut them really short all the time so that there's no reason to do it. Yeah, like, I don't know if it's just that, like, it was so long ago for me. Like, it was more than 30 years ago. So, like, I don't know. I don't really remember if it was just that it was bitter or if there was something else to it. Like, I just remember it being repelling. It was absolutely repellent. Like, it sucked. I didn't like it at all.
But she does stress this was a one-off. Thank God for that. There are still some unanswered questions, though.
We just pop it out of his mouth and kind of distract him, but his is a little bit different for comfort.
A little bit different. It makes
and the
him
thumb
happy.
guard never worked.
Yeah, thumb guard for never worked.
Because he was so smart.
He was either really mad or he pulled it off.
No, he always figured out how to pulled
it off, but
always.
usually was very mad before that.
If he didn't figure it out right away. Yeah.
So it was just one of those things where it was just let it go, get him talking first, and kind of work with him, and Let him have that comfort for a little while, right?
Many people with
give him something else. Like, what the fuck? Like, just give him something else. Even if you're not able to stop him from sucking on his thumb, give him something else. Give him like a... Don't give him a candy or something, but like a... Oh man, like a pacifier or something to utilize and like break him of the habit of sucking on his thumb. Because you also have to keep in mind that this kid is on some sort of mental spectrum too, right? So maybe he sucks his thumb as a coping thing to something that he went through, and it ties into the fact that he's on that spectrum.
Experience in this area don't dispute the possibility the reported behavior from the child in question was present, particularly one who was on the spectrum. However, people did take issue with the framing, which presented the son as an instigator or an aggressor. If you keep in mind the youngster was now in another household where he is reported to be completely happy, some felt there must have been certain conditions that had precipitated his outbursts. On top of this, many felt there were circumstantial details which didn't appear compatible with the Staufers' narrative. For example, the Bali trip that the Staufers took in January. This already seemed like a questionable idea given the alleged circumstances by the parents, but many observed that in the video prior to their departure, the son appears to be freely roaming the house without causing the panic that the parents had recounted.
Another thing that he loved.
And not only that, but we've never once, in any of these clips that he's got, we've never actually seen this hired professional that had to control him because of how they claim that he was. Like, so we haven't really seen any evidence that he's actually abusing anybody or like attacking people. When they show their other kids, you don't like. I haven't seen anything that looks like bruising, scratches, scabs, or bleeding on their faces or arms or anything from him attacking them in any way weird or any way either. Which is, once again, odd that they make the claims that this is how this kid's behaving, but they don't really have anything to do. It really just they're consistently inconsistent, if that makes sense.
Is wrestling on
the floor.
It's a
terrible
joke. Instigate him in the evening
terrible.
To try to get him to wrestle him, or like roughhouse, which trust me, my other son is obsessed with too. But that is one thing that he loves to do.
On top of this, many argue that the financial reasoning didn't stand up given how the Staufers purchased a new house, took multiple holidays, and indulged in luxury items, such as what is alleged to be a Cartier bracelet, spotted while she was ironically lamenting their son's therapy costs. Some people also pointed out the Staufers' refusal to share certain records regarding their adopted son with the police, though I assume in that instance they were acting on the advice of their lawyers, so little can be taken there.
As far as his personality goes, he is the cuddliest, most energetic, funnest, giggly little guy ever. He is strong-willed. He knows exactly what he wants, and I love that about him. One thing I love about him, no matter who is having like the worst day in the world, if he comes and smiles at you or giggles, everybody smiles.
In another interview published in September 2019, just after the child had turned 4, Myka appears to convey the message that as a child he was relatively low maintenance. To quote, "He is a great kid, and his condition doesn't involve that much overall care. All you need is a big heart and practice patience every day. It's a different kind of patience. He does receive 30 hours of ABA, Applied Behavior Analysis, in-home therapy a week, and goes to private preschool to help reach his highest potential. If the
So here, I'll get it.
Goes to private preschool to help reach his highest
people
potential.
Can read if they want. So the thing is, this statement that she's making is in direct contradiction to what she said before. Once again, it's like the amount of contradiction that these two are making, that the Staufers are making in regard to this child, as well as the audacity to act as if people aren't going to see that and understand that you're contradicting yourself about this child's behavior and the way that he acts, that there's no evidence to back up your claims, which, as was stated, to an extent could be the advice of lawyers, depending on what's going on behind the scenes. Like, it's also a matter of perspective. People tend to not put things on the internet that do not make them look positive. They don't put things on the internet that are not endearing. They don't post pictures of themselves at their lowest moments. They don't make posts discussing things about how they have failed and they are doing terrible, or they've fallen short of a goal or a promise, and that they're trying to do better. People only present what they want you to see, and those negative things don't get presented very often. So the internet is only seeing one half of what's going on, and we're not actually seeing anything else, and then they're contradicting what is supposedly happening behind the scenes all the time, which makes this incredibly irritating to look at, because you're only ever going to have a story from the people defending themselves, but the way it's contradicting, just you can't help but also be like, well, you're fucking lying. So it's not a good situation to be in. Did you explaining your boyfriend to your parents for the 500th time? Jesus. Yet you low-key present like that's what I do. Like, I don't really care. I just show, like, I tell things on my social media that are positive as well as negative, as well as just like thoughts, opinions. Like, it's people are like they have a varied personality, essentially. So I don't like the idea of just presenting a false presentation of what it is that people deal with. So I just don't do it. So it is what it is. And that's the same way I do my stream. Like, I just try to be genuine. I'm not trying to create some facade in order to get more people's attention. So it is what it is. It's fun to bully celebrities on Twitter. I mean, that's what the internet does, isn't it? They just, you troll people and then you bully people because you have the anonymity of the internet, and that's just kind of the way it goes. Oh no, you're gonna cancel me. Whatever will I do?
If the adoption was dissolved at latest May, this provides an almost non-existent window of time for the child's behaviour to regress in the way that Myka claimed it did, particularly without any clear stimulus at all. Many brought attention to the numerous changes that the son had endured, including moving house, school enrollment, vacations, all that may provoke an adverse response from someone on the spectrum, yet didn't seem to.
It's first time ever in Florida.
He's probably living the dream.
There are a lot of people who are understandably frustrated at the police's conclusion, but I can't say I'm surprised that no further action was taken, although there are very legitimate qualms with certain decisions made by the family, which we'll discuss soon. I couldn't see a state prosecutor taking the case as it was, especially as law enforcement seemed to perceive it. If you assume the courts would err on the side of caution, then a lot of it would be defended as misdirected attempts to establish authority or as under pressure rash decision-making, rather than a pattern of malicious misdeeds.
This is also the case of how the United States justice system is supposed to operate. So you can make accusations and the police can investigate those accusations, but if they don't actually find anything to substantiate it, they can't proceed past that. And they have to decide whether or not it's worth the money to continue investigating, or if they should instead spend the money and time and manpower to investigate something else. So here are these accusations. We've looked into it as much as we can at the moment, and it's not really taking us anywhere, versus this person that got stabbed 6 times and the body was dumped in a swamp and we uncovered it after it had been there for 6 months. That's probably going to need a little bit more attention and warrant more attention and resources than something that you looked into that hit a dead end because there's not enough evidence. And even if you can substantiate something with one piece of evidence, that's not necessarily enough, because the way the American legal system is supposed to operate, the way that it is stated in our founding documents to operate, is that you are innocent until proven guilty. That means that the onus of proof is on the accusation. It's on the government. It's on the people who are pressing charges. It's whoever it is that's, like, if you're the defendant, they have to prove your guilt. You shouldn't be having to prove your innocence if you're the defendant at all. So they need enough evidence to be able to make a case to prove that this is something that's not just like, oh, okay, it's a one-off, but that this is something that's going on and it's got a purpose to it and it's malicious. They have to have enough evidence to actually prove guilt. It's not as simple as, well, there were accusations and here's one bit of evidence, you're guilty. That's not how things work. Nope, I do not know who that is at all.
I'm not entirely sure a court case would have really settled any outstanding gripes either. The Staufers are still parents to 4 children, and although that shouldn't affect legal liability, logically speaking, I think an extended legal procedure may just place further stress on the remaining children, and I don't think anyone really wants that. You may even have to involve a child who everyone seems so concerned about. It all seems a bit too much trouble. In spite of this, I understand that the inconsistencies probably leave people rather dissatisfied. And although you can accept that there are details which we will never know, and we don't have to know, I think it'd be nice to arbitrate some truth from an ordeal filled with so many conflicting messages.
I don't know about you guys, but it's just like the craziest thing. Like every day it starts to hit me like he's my real son. Like he had a foster mom and he had a real mom at one time, and they were amazing parts of his life. But it's so crazy to think that like I'm his only real, like, I'm his mom.
Myka's detractors frame her as self-interested, self-serving, and self-gratifying, using an adoptee to further her own online image and fuel a white savior complex, whereas those more sympathetic may see her as a victim of her own romanticist perceptions of what adopting a child would ensue, trying to withstand the inevitable failure. Was this a mother who adopted a son for the purpose of profit, or was she just an idealist in way over her head? Consumerist or fantasist? Well,
I'm gonna lean toward it's a bit of both. This isn't something where these two things are mutually exclusive of one another. The fact of the matter is, most of human reality exists in a gray area. It's not as white and black as here's this situation and is it because of this or is it because of that? It's a little bit of both. I bet you to a point there's some idealism of being able to help a child that's in need to be able to have a better life than they had access to, as well as the fact that in the meantime and along the way, I can also further my position on the internet where I make my money, allowing me to offer this child even more, right? It's not like all these things are just coming from a malicious place because it's a malicious person. It takes a specific type of broken mentality to actually exist in that way. The world is gray. It's not white or black, it is gray, and people need to stop trying to see things as either or when it's a combination of multiple things all the time. Sounds like a person that I'm happy I don't have to deal with knowing about. And I'm not even going to look into.
Let's take one more look.
Hold on.
Why would you want your parachute to have lights? How dumb.
Myka Staufer made a series of awful decisions. There is little debate over that. She should have listened to expert advice all those years ago when they told her that this was not a good idea. Yet she didn't. So here we are today. Regardless of the truth surrounding their son, as adults, they ultimately bear that responsibility.
It's her. Like, I remember, like, praying to God and saying, like, I trusted you so much, and, like, you gave me a little bit more than I knew what to do with, and I just wish you could be able to overcome this. And we love our son so much, like, we want the best for him. And I'm not saying autism is sad or a bad diagnosis, but just, like, everything, like, kind of just compounded down together. And it was hard.
There is no degree of preparation that you can possibly perform which will guarantee a pitfall-free adoption, particularly when dealing with systems which may not be subject to the same scrutiny that you find at home. The Staufers had multiple opportunities to stop and pay attention to the advice that they had been given, to actually carefully evaluate the condition of their son, and act accordingly. In my opinion, they did not.
They definitely did not, because of the fact that they had stated, he's our son, and we're going to have him, right? Basically is how they said it. Paraphrasing, obviously. But the thing is, they went through all this, oh, well, he's got autism, but we don't care. Well, he does this, and he's got this issue. We don't care. Oh, well, he's not that big of a deal. You just need patience and this and that. Constantly contradicting themselves and constantly just bullshitting their way through the whole damn situation.
But all I want to say is, I'm bonding with my kid. I'm doing what I'm doing. We put our lives on social media, and I'm not going to have people sit there and treat me like a fool, because I'm not going to take it. I'm not the kind of person that just takes stuff.
You put shit on the internet, they're going to make you look like a fool. Congratulations. Welcome to the internet. I don't know how you're roughly my age, and you don't understand that that's how the internet operates. What the fuck? Oh my god, just people who think that they're immune to the way the internet works is amazing. This is how the internet has worked since it was dial-up, and nobody really had access to it, especially in comparison to how many people have access to the internet today. Like, when AOL sent out CDs and you would get that in the mail and you would put that in your computer for a free 60 minutes of internet access on an AOL dial-up connection, all you had was chat rooms of anonymity where people were shit-talking each other. You went in there to just do nothing but shit-talk people the whole time. There was rampant racism. There were people trying to find kids and solicit themselves to minors. Like, it was all over the place. It was just public chat rooms all the time. Like, you were just in like a Yahoo Messenger type of thing, but it was a chat board that operated that way, and it was you and however many people were in there, and all of this possible shit was all going on at once. That is how the internet began. What makes you think that just because that's not how the internet is today with these chat boards and that being what the internet is and how people communicate on the internet, what makes you think that people are going to use the internet to interact differently? It's fucking ridiculous. See, I don't need to know any of this. I don't need to know none of that.
And that's fine.
Myka Staufer's channel committed to presenting a profile of this mother who is ready to make a difference, who believed that as long as you dig deep, there is nothing that cannot be achieved. This may be true to an extent, but sometimes digging deep means more than just what you see on inspirational TV dramas. It means education, it means analysis, it can even mean changing your own life to accommodate another, and there was clearly too much Myka had established previously that she was not ready to give up. Myka wanted to introduce her son to the Staufer life, but that's not a membership everyone is cut out for. Yet, in spite of this, the channel's uploads appeared to portray their new son as coping with the sometimes chaotic lifestyle very aptly, even if this sometimes meant unhealthy coping mechanisms. This was echoed in interviews where Myka regularly emphasized that in spite of the challenges, the son wasn't excessively disruptive, and Myka had found it to be a rewarding experience in itself. To audience members, it appears that this gamble had paid off. Contrast this to the police report, which framed their relationship as under severe strain and presenting the son's condition as completely out of control and portraying him as a ruffian. It felt like they were talking about two different children. With such conflicting messages, many accused the Staufers of omitting and exaggerating details of their convenience to construct an image which justified their perspective when it suited them. Most couldn't see this as being a sudden shift. Even if you consider the fact that the child's condition had worsened in such a time period, it would be very out of character for a parent to legitimately give up on a child who they had nurtured for years on the basis of a few turbulent months, for a condition that they understand and acknowledge. So this begs the question that many have asked: what happened?
A condition they understand, that they acknowledge, and that they also discard as if it's unimportant. They're like, it doesn't play a role in what they care for, what they care about. That is how they continue to discuss it, which is a bit fucking ridiculous. Especially, well, it's ridiculous when you look at everything else. I need to know so I can take notes. I'm not taking any notes on this guy. I don't care. Like, I skimmed over that enough to know that I don't care to know anything about the guy. It's that simple. Should you look up those people near you? No. No, you shouldn't. There's a website. I think there's actually like an app you can get on your phone now in the U.S. that shows where people who are convicted of doing those things, whether it's with minors or not, and it shows like pins in the area around you for where these people are registered to live, because they are registered because of their situation. And the thing is, there's far more of them around most of the people in the United States because it's predominant in cities where you have the largest populations. So the majority of people live around far more of those types of people than anybody realizes, and you probably don't want to know.
Why the inconsistencies? Let's talk theory. The first theory is more sympathetic, though still quite critical. We'll call it the denial theory. This is the one that Myka appears to appeal to in her Instagram statement. The denial theory dictates that the challenges with the son in question had actually been more prevalent than they had been represented as on the channel. And in interviews, Myka tried to excuse the problems in an attempt to prove those who doubted her wrong and to try and show that she was ready for the challenge. However, she was ill-equipped and the environment wasn't appropriate for the child, but she was too set in her ways, and it wasn't until these problems became even more apparent where she had to swallow her pride and realize she was not cut out for this job. This is supported by evidence of Myka's own concessions of existing behavioral issues over the years, and even private posts which appeared to show that there were basic elements that she was struggling to cope with in the past few years. However, with this in mind, many would argue that these posts also reflect a more cynical theory, given how one in particular appears to prioritize optics over truth. So let's talk about the clout theory. This theory adopts the belief that these Staufers took in a child with the intent to profit off their plight. Adopting children from abroad was already shown to amplify traffic and bolster channels, and Myka, well known for appealing to her subscriber base, sought to capitalize on this trend. She would subsequently publicize and monetize all content relating to his adoption and home life, with the motivation of pandering to people's optimistic nature and the romanticized notions they held about adopting children. However, over time, the cost of maintaining this brand was exceeding the profit, and as the returns dwindled and their child remained financially demanding, the parents decided that his presence was no longer advantageous and decided to end this journey. This is obviously supported by some of the evidence that we have already discussed, which demonstrate a clear consciousness of one's public image, but also a lot of behavioral patterns that seem to be present in their content, most accentuated by their shockingly bad announcement video, which appeared to be focused around preserving people's perception of themselves once more. The police report didn't flatter Myka either, with the confession that the duct tape incident occurred all because she wasn't prepared to spend a couple hundred more quid on a new one. On the other hand, given the cost of adoption and the subsequent complications, it seems like a pretty hefty investment to sink in, without the guarantee of returns. And even if the formula had worked on other channels, there was no assurance that it would work here. On top of this, if they had enough money to sink into an adoption, even with the donations, it would be a strange pursuit for the sole purpose of wealth. Would it have really been worth it? There must have been some personal sacrifice, right? It's hard to look at the situation and not...
You would have some personal sacrifice going into this stuff if it was like you being genuine about wanting to have this adoption and have this child in your life. The fact is, you're not going to have that if you're specifically trying to get certain things and you're too proud and you have too much of an ego. If you're not able to put aside your ego and your pride and overcome those things and put that child first, it's not going to work out. And adopting is not going to be easy. You're going to have to adapt to that child's needs. That's the way that it works. That's just simply the way that it goes. Yeah, I don't think you should have done that, Tangy. Do not think you should have done that.
Not at least consider that Myka was far too preoccupied with how people looked at her, to the point where it often felt like she prioritized that above the well-being of those who she purported to care about. She may have been set in her ways and in denial to an extent. I don't doubt there was a degree of ignorance, but it also feels like the conceptual benefits of having such a child on a YouTube channel corrupted her decision-making. When other people told her it was wise to provide the son with a more appropriate environment, she turned...
See, this is a stupid comment. Why not adopt in the U.S.? I don't understand. Blame Angelina Jolie. She started this trend. Like, that's stupid. Like, that is stupid. Absolutely dumb. If you're going to adopt a child the child that fits. Adopt the child that you think you're going to be able to help the most and that you're going to be the best fit for, regardless of where they're from. Really, that's what you should be doing. The fact is, if you're adopting from overseas, specific countries have a higher issue of this, and like continents have a higher issue of this being the case. But the thing is, you may very well be contributing to human trafficking by adopting from overseas unless you're going through legitimate channels of adoption. If you're not going through the legitimate channels and making sure that you have the government involved in making sure that these are legitimate and that this child is actually like up for adoption, that they're an orphan or that they've been abandoned, whatever it may be, and not kidnapped, you may be very well aiding and participating in human trafficking without your own knowledge of it. So beware. You don't know any near you. All you know is one did it to a... Jeez.
Turned a blind eye, proudly proclaiming her defiance, only falling back on expert opinion when it suited her agenda. Whether that agenda was more cost-motivated or family-motivated, I do not know. Myka references both in the report, and both could be seen as plausible reasons, but I don't think either could fully justify the outcome. She favored the pursuit of this vision of a family over the well-being of a child who had no say, and that was inexcusable.
Yeah, and that does seem to be the case.
Just like my favorite perfume.
It does seem to be the case that she leveraged this child for more views, more clicks, more income, more money off of the internet, as well as maintaining the illusion of this happy family life that she's trying to put together for her content. And that's not right. There's plenty to criticize there, and it seems like there's just a lot of other criticism that's coming at them for this adoption that's completely unwarranted. Like I said, the world is more gray than anybody wants to acknowledge, and this is no exception to that rule. Oops.
A lot of people have reflected on this situation with the mind that Myka's error was giving up on a child of her own. However, although the decision may have been the catalyst for her critics, the greatest mistake that Myka made was adopting a child in the first place. The police report also disclosed that the adoption was never finalized, which is an optional process in the US. This revelation led many to assert that the Staufers never planned to keep their adopted son. Although I personally feel this is unlikely given how they hammered in the rhetoric of adoption being forever, it may show they harbored more reservations than they displayed. Or, to be honest, they may not have considered it important, which also may be indicative. Many people asked if Myka would do the same if it was a biological son, and the answer is obviously a resounding no. Well, we hope at least. This was one of the focal points for public opinion.
What was with that animated face for his avatar?
Family, but similarly gave away. On principle, the outcome is positive. The child is in a better place now. There is no doubt about that. He has a family who are well equipped to deal with his needs, and the Staufer family are likely relieved of a challenging relationship as well, and hopefully have more time to dedicate it to the rest of their children.
Yeah, all in all, it seems like it worked out in this child's best interest, which is fantastic. It has that happy ending regardless of what led to it. The thing is, This is something that I think that the Staufers really just were not prepared to handle. They went into it with an assumption of how this would work and the difficulty that it would have associated with it and their ability to handle it. They went in with an idea of this that was inaccurate and came from a place of just ignorance, having not done it most likely, right? And now here they are with a difficult adoption because of the issues of this child. And they were ill-equipped for it. Just mentally, as well as emotionally, as well as just personally, it seems. So you got to make sure that you're in the correct position to be able to handle these types of issues if you're going to adopt anything, be it an animal for a new pet or a human being. Like, you have to be capable and in the correct position in your own life to be able to offer what that adoption is going to require. And it comes with a lot of things people don't anticipate because it's not something that many people are aware of. So hopefully people just stop kind of paying attention to this drama because of the fact of, because of the assumptions and insinuations of why they made this adoption and what they did, and instead start looking at it as an example of, here are the difficulties and hurdles you may have to overcome through adoption and due to adoption that you do not anticipate in order to help alleviate these issues from just being existent for people looking for adoption or hoping to adopt for whatever reason. Maybe they're at a point in their life where they want more kids, but they're beyond their time of being able to conceive children. Maybe they're just not capable of conceiving a child. Maybe they would prefer to adopt a child because it's just, there's plenty of children without a family and without a home, and they just have some sort of moral leaning toward adoption rather than having a child, with that being the situation. So I hope people actually just see this and take lessons from it, because there are lessons to learn, and I think that the lessons that this shows are far more important than the drama around whether or not what they did was morally acceptable. You gave boy and girl a punch they deserve? I mean, no. Tangy, I don't think you understand. I have literally killed more than 100 people for what I would consider, well, not 100 people. I've killed more than 100 people, but I've killed dozens of people for what I would consider to be less of a crime than that action. No way in hell would I pay money or support them in any way.
However, many can't help but feel displeased by the conclusion, because adversity is part of parenting, and that means stepping up to the challenge, not running from it. So, although
just some of those people have done
right decision
what I would consider to be more,
it seemed to be an outcome only precipitated by the parents' incompetence.
I don't give a shit if they're hot or not.
It's not easier with each kid. It does not feel the same. It feels harder with every single child I've had. Every time it's harder, because different kids have different emotional needs, and different kids have different needs, and different kids want different things.
As mentioned, adoption is no facile enterprise. When many adopt, it's with the commitment that it is the creation of an inseparable bond which will withstand the challenges that such a venture may throw at you. When you bring a child into your family, people expect you to treat them like your own biological offspring. After all, they are no less human. In a way,
yeah.
Myka did, but she applied the blueprint Staufer formula, which in her mind had worked with her other children. When it worked with their son, it worked. It was great. When it didn't, well, he clearly just had some learning to do.
Yes, and once again, that's ego and pride. That is her being incapable of setting aside her ego and pride, because this is what worked with all of her children, so she believes she knows how to handle a child. Whereas this child has specific needs because he's on the autistic spectrum. So certain things are not going to work with him at all, and will in fact make him far worse. Not even just, oh, it's worse, but some things will make him far worse. So you have to be able to adapt. Set aside your pride and ego on, oh, well, this worked for all my kids, so it'll work for you. And you have to be able to adapt to the situation and do what's best. Like that's really the takeaway from this, is somebody who's incapable of making that separation from themselves and doing what's best for this child. All right, Tangy, thanks for coming by. I appreciate it.
Are you done?
He's just having a bad day. He's a grumpy day today.
There is never a one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to parenting, and although Myka professed to have understood this eventually, this wasn't reflected enough in her actions. For example, in the police report, Myka remarks that his son would regularly react poorly when his siblings were overwhelming him, retreating to the closet and rocking himself non-stop. Yet Myka...
That's common amongst kids on the autistic spectrum. Right? Like, this is a prime example. Right here is a prime example of exactly what I was saying about her own failure.
Siblings were overwhelming him, retreating to the closet and rocking himself non-stop. Yet Myka still made the decision to have another child, which they gave birth to around mid-2019, which would mean a high-maintenance infant around the house, likely further contributing to a stressful environment for their son. It's these successive poor decisions that could easily aggravate a condition, and to many onlookers it just felt like they were playing Russian roulette with his triggers.
That's because other people understand what the autistic spectrum entails, at least to some extent, whereas they seem to have just assumed that this wasn't going to apply to them and they would be able to do whatever the hell they wanted to do. And like you said, successive bad decisions. Like, they're constantly making decisions that are based upon what's best for the Staufers and not what's best for this child that they've adopted. And they need to make sure that this child they've adopted is settled, that he's accustomed to the situation, and that he understands his environment and his boundaries before they start trying to have more children and expand beyond where they're at. You have to kind of just hit the brakes if you have a kid on the spectrum like that, because you have to make sure that you understand how to take care of their needs and that they understand what's going to change, because a lot of them do not handle change well to any extent. It depends on where they're at on the spectrum, but it's something to be aware of as somebody who's got to deal with that type of thing, right?
Pure theory here. Pure theory. But maybe that's why they took the infant abroad, to remove that negative stimulus from the son's life. Myka Staufer should not have adopted. Not just for that reason, but for a multitude of others. They were not ready for what the child's diagnosis meant,
exactly.
And the information that the child's disposition was not as expected. They should have thought much harder than they did. Adoption's not going to plan and coming to an end isn't an immensely rare eventuality. It happens in a minority but substantial percentage of adoptions, and I'm sure that many people involved in those have not acted with reckless or selfish will. Sometimes these things don't work out, so I don't want to attack everyone who has ever had to give up an adopted child. But the Staufers had a window to act and retain their dignity, and that window passed.
Guys, I have to say, you like the fast cars, don't you? I think he's definitely my son, aren't you? Are you my boy? Yeah, you like fast cars.
Look at how excited he was about that question.
It's so cool, guys.
Put the finances
he was real
aside,
happy
put
about
the channel aside. This was for the child. And his position on such a family channel was already debatable, but the revelation that he was suffering from an affliction which directly inhibited his ability to communicate should have been cause for serious rumination. At that point, with the advice of experts, Myka should have made the decision whether to find a more appropriate home for the son or prepare herself to make significant changes to her own life. She chose the third option, which was to press on with the predetermined plans and upping the dosage on the sappy, sentimental, spiritual language of how it was just meant to be.
He's been home for, like I said, almost 2 years, and I don't know what I would do without him. We have hard days. We do. Not every day is easy. When you have a kiddo that has so many wants and desires and wants to be heard all the time and is strong-willed, you have communication struggles, and some
that's just
one thing
that's just human interaction.
More than ever is I feel like our connection as a family has gotten so profoundly amazing. is easily one of
and
my
then you had to
favorite
get rid
people
of
in the
him, though,
entire
right?
world.
Like,
Myka and James Staufer
they made it through that honeymoon phase.
Will have to live with the ramifications of the decisions they made, even if that only extends to social media. With everything in mind, it's hard to really see how Myka will relaunch her channel. It has remained dormant since the situation, and maybe that's for the best. James's channel remains active and still attracts significant viewership. Whether he will continue to be the sole uploader for the family bread is another question that only time will answer.
I mean, it's also not related to their family.
I don't necessarily disagree with showing childhood mental struggles in video form,
it doesn't
particularly
seem
for educational purposes. There is a lot that one can learn from such a portrayal, but at the same time it needs to be presented fairly and impartially with respect to the child at the centre of the spectacle, and that's an aspect that a lot of family channels fall short on, because too often they're more concerned with catering to an image rather than presenting a faithful portrait based on the trials and tribulations that a family under such stress would have to confront. Many asked if Myka Staufer would have treated her biological son the same way that she treated her adopted son. It's an easy and mostly rhetorical question that does provoke some good discourse at least. However, for me, there was a more interesting question.
Does it really create any good discourse or introspection into the situation? Because the fact of the matter is, any time that there's been an issue that, in this video at least, that she had to interact with this child in a way that was in response to him acting out or throwing a fit, etc., it was the same way that she interacted with her own kids, according to the way that this was presented. And the issue is that she was constantly expecting him to respond to those kinds of responses from her and her husband that their children had, not the response of somebody who's on the autistic spectrum.
Would she have done this at all?
It seems like that shouldn't be part of a discussion or debate or any of that at all.
To have such a consequential decision riding on the existence of that platform. YouTube influences the creative liberties we take, the decisions we make. That is beyond doubt. But where is the line? Where does YouTube end and real life begin? These are the questions that I'll leave with you today. I hope they are thought-provoking enough, even if they are a little simple.
Well, we had our discussion about it. I gave my thoughts. We gave him a like on this yesterday. But that's that, apparently. So, I mean, there you go. It seems like they had a mix of, like, a desire to adopt a child, grow their family further, as they also had another kid during this period of time. But they also wanted this to benefit their online presence and their YouTube channel. So it's not all negative, it's not all positive. It's in that gray area where most things in life come from and exist and reside. So it is what it is. Really just that simple.